Good evening and welcome to our show Healthy Life. I'm your host Dr. Isa Al-Ghanem. Today we will be meeting with Dr. Osama Alsmadi, head of Dasman Genome Center, and we will be discussing some of genetic diseases and the role of genetic research centers in Kuwait. Good evening, Doctor.
Good evening, Dr.
If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us on the following means. Welcome back. So, Dr. Osama, could you introduce yourself to our viewers, please?
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. First, my name is Dr. Osama Alsmadi, and I work at Dasman Diabetes Insitute in the division of Genome Center. And we are working there, taking care of the genetic research that Kuwait needs.
That's good. It's good to know that there is a dedicated genome center in Kuwait where it's in collaboration with the one in the Ministry of Health that can provide the patients and the population with a better care than what we thought of. Could you tell us more about the center that you work in?
Overall, the Dasman Diabetes Institute is established in response to the vision of the late Amir Jabir Sabah, and also inaugurated in 2006 by current Amir Sabah Ahmed Jabir Sabah. And the whole center is working and focusing on diabetes and the complications that also associated with this disease. And we try to look at this disease from many facets and as a more of holistic look, including research, the part where I am involved in. And we also offer clinical services, support education, and also the trying to introduce the aspect of change of lifestyle for better health.
Well, it's known that Dasman Center is a landmark in Kuwait, extensive research and search of better health care, providing it to the population. Can you tell us more about the Genome Center?
The Genome Center is one of the research divisions that are embedded within the Dasman Institute. And we are a number of research disciplines. The Genome Center itself is one of the divisions to really look at the disease from the root causes of the diseases, which are, as we know it, genetics. And genetics is, as much as we like to simplify it, it really means a lot of knowledge, a lot of information. And the Dasman Genome Center was established in using the state-of-the-art technology advancements that the best center around the world today are using. So we have brought these technologies, and we also are helped by the presence of competent technology players who also understand the technology, and also informatics team who are able to deal with the data we generate. Because unlike the traditional genetics, in our center we generate millions of data points per every sample we look at from one patient or participants. So we have a lot of knowledge we generate. We have too much of informatics division who help us to use this data and to understand what is the causes or the roots of the disease we see as we understand it. And of course, the whole concept is really moving from, again, simple genetics to more of modern genetics. With all of the advancements and knowledge around the world, which we have brought to this Genome Center by the support of the administration where we work. And we try to really bring in new knowledge that is useful by comparing people who are healthy to those who are not. And by this comparison, we are better in understanding what are really the differences between a healthy person, a diseased person from genetic perspective.
And to give our viewers a little bit of perspective about genetic diseases, can we get a definition of what are the genes?
The genes are basically, these are biological components of our body that basically exist in every cell we have in our self. And the genes are not one, not two, not 100. They are, as we know it today, nearly 25 to 30,000 genes. And all these genes are responsible for different functions in our body, from vision to heart function to muscle to bone cell. Of course, every part of our body needs one set of these genes to work together to give the function we need to stay alive and function.
Yeah.
And we're interested in looking at these genes, with the help of the technology now available to us. So we have tools that enable us not to look at one or two, but to look at the complete gene set of an individual. And that's really now the modern genomics, and moving to better understanding where someone can basically have their genetic map in their hand, to say this is who I am, this is my risk or chance to be healthy or not, by using this knowledge that is connected to databases that explain what is health when someone is not suffering from disease versus someone who has. And we compare what we find to these databases, which are international databases, and we try to really make some guess of what's likely of someone staying healthy or if he or she at risk. And this information can be useful to that individual to take care of their life.
Yeah, because people think that genes are the color of the hair, the color of the eye, color of skin, the look of the face. They don't know how depth genes are.
What you mentioned, doctor, is in fact very true. All of these features you have mentioned are actually driven by genes which we carry. But it's only part of our genes. But there are other genes that are responsible for the function of our immune system, for example, response to infection, the ability to produce insulin, that basically is what keep us healthy, and when this goes wrong, then someone becomes diabetic, for example, with all of the types of diabetes as we know it. So the genes play, of course, basically the life we live, and they are responsible for everything we do. And of course, if we go too deep into genetics, these genes are staying in this sequence, what we call it as a DNA, which is sitting inside the cell. But this cell will make different, from using these genes, different important proteins, enzymes that help us to stay healthy and fight diseases or function, to take a medication, for example, to use this, in the right way. And this is all controlled by genes which make proteins, and proteins do the function at the end.
Yeah, exactly. Also, you mentioned that people can now have their gene maps with them.
Yes.
Yeah. How is that possible?
It's again, thanks to the advancement of technology today. When we look at the first genome, which came in the early 2000, and it took about 100 centers around the world to collaborate together to put together one genome, which was published early of this turn of the 21st century. And the technology since then has advanced so much that now enables a single center to do that work that required about 100 centers around the world to collaborate to make one gene. And in fact, we are proud in Dasman Genome Center to report we have already actually mapped 8 individuals from Kuwait, their complete genome, which now is starting as a seed for genomics research in Kuwait. And of course, this is a shy number, but we should be proud of that, because this is the first time in Kuwait to produce a complete genome map of 8 individuals that we are now knowing, in fact, what genes they have, what kind of special changes they carry compared to the Kuwaiti population and outside Kuwait. So we are at that level where we look at the complete genome, and we're also looking at only what we call is exome, which is basically the codes of the genes. which is only about 1%, 2% of the complete genome. And these are the ones that do the functions of the body in different tissues and organs. So now we have actually this knowledge, and it's like a seed as we see it, but it's a beginning. And we hopefully, looking forward to really scale up this work, where we, for the first time, put this database for Kuwait, because otherwise there is no such knowledge existing before this level. Although now in Kuwait, we and others are trying to establish new knowledge for the genomes of the Kuwaiti people. Because now when you look around, all of this data is now building globally in every country. There is genome projects. In the region also is catching up here. We know Saudi Arabia, Qatar is also catching up. And we are hopeful also Kuwait will also join the club of Kuwait Genome Project to really bring this useful knowledge that is like really a gold mine for the health and well-being of the citizens of the Kuwait.
How it will help getting the genome map of the Kuwaiti population?
We think this is, again, moving from traditional clinical practice to what we call as personalized medicine today. And me and you sitting here, as much as, we carry the same genes, we in fact have variation, in our genes. And these small variations, although less than 1% between two individuals, they make a difference between health and disease. And we try to look at these changes and to understand how they are related to someone who is healthy, who is not, and make this comparison. Again, it has to be supported by the sophisticated informatics tools, which take all this knowledge and to say someone is made this change is actually putting someone at risk, or it's a benign, meaning it will not affect somebody's health. And these simple examples are one change can lead to diseases, sickle cell anemia, as we know. One small change in one location of this 3 billion data points of our genome, one change can mean sickle cell to someone if they carry that mutation.
This is really amazing, and I think this is the attention that healthcare providers they are looking for, rather than generalized population care. They are looking at personalized care, tailor-made care.
Yes, and I think this is really the new era now, where someone is now able to have their genetic map in a small flash memory. They carry around, they say, this is who I am genetically. And this can be used by the specialist. This is, I have to, not to oversell it, but it's really beginning, and it's a science at its infancy now. Although it's catching up, and people now believing more and more in the practice of it, and this will, I think, not long time from today, it will become really the practice of really dealing with somebody's disease or treatment using the right medication for their disease, that knowing this person will respond to the treatment rather than trying an error and try this next time until we land on the right medication. Hopefully we will not have to go in the agony of trial and error until now, just from the first hit you will choose the right choice of medication. You
mentioned earlier that, for example, sickle cell anemia is only mutation in one genome.
Correct.
How does a mutation happens?
Mutations, they do not happen just in a glance. These changes take generations. So in our body itself, biologically speaking, if we go to the basics of genetics, there are enzymes responsible for copying the DNA from one source and make a copy, when we call DNA replication. So some instances, there's, because of sometimes adaptation to pressure of the environment, our body will respond by making these changes that are supposed to be helpful to us. And then this has happened many generations back, but once it happened, you cannot reverse it. So it stays. As long as the generations are passing from grandfather to father to son to grandchildren, it becomes like a domino effect. And it transfers from one generation to the next. And that change, again, it's again a response to pressure from the environment, adaptation as we call it in evolution terms, but it's sometimes necessary. But unfortunately, sometimes this change can mean disease to someone. Yes.
What causes the mutation? environment. We hear that radiation can cause mutations.
This is a different kind of mutation, which is basically mutation that happens after birth.
Mm-hmm.
And those changes are again exposure to pollution, to radiation, and usually these kind of mutations are associated with development of cancer, for example.
Yeah.
And that's again a whole science by itself, and there is of course many examples of that. But what we try to do today in our center is focusing more of inherited genetic changes, and these are concerning either families or sometimes the whole society. When it comes to the example of diabetes, which is today affects 1 out of 4 people who are Kuwaiti today, which is really scary and it deserves some attention and understanding.
Yeah.
Hopefully, by knowing the nature of these changes and who is at risk, will offer some also useful information for treatment of the disease and handling the disease, etc.
Let's go back to Dasman Center again and to Genome Center. What are some of the researches that you have done? You already mentioned the pioneer thing that you have done, that you were able to draw the map of 8 individuals in Kuwait, genome map. What else research that really impacted the population here? Again,
when we plan our research projects, we look and interact with society, knowing what really is needed. Mm-hmm. We started with 2 main areas. One is we call population-based project, mm-hmm. which is looking at genetics of obesity and diabetes in Kuwait. Mm-hmm. The second branch is looking at diseases that runs in families only, as we call rare Mendelian disorders. Mm-hmm. The second type is the disease that only require one change in one gene to lead to disease. Mm-hmm. We were successfully actually resolving some of the genes that went wrong in some families. And these include, but not limited to, as examples, is diseases in the eye, which is liver, which is hereditary ophthalmic neuropathy. Mm-hmm. And that's again a mitochondrial disease, for example. We were able to find the defect in the mitochondrion of those individuals who happen to, in fact, live through the invasion and post-invasion days. Mm-hmm. And we think even pollution is even contributing to that, adding to the stress, genetic stress together. And those people now are having some eye disorders. We now, in fact, looked at those families and we found a defect. And this was published in British Journal of Ophthalmology recently. We have other disorders, like, for example, disorders that lead to anemia, for diseases that lead to immune deficiencies in collaboration with Kuwait University. And we have really found successfully the defective genes in those families. Mm-hmm. And we hope, in fact, to scale this up and collaborating further with the Kuwait Medical Genetics Center today under the leadership of Dr. Leah Bastek, and we are actually collaborating with her. But we, again, hoping to scale up that nature of collaboration to be able to produce a lot of high-quality, useful research inside Kuwait by working together. Mm-hmm. We also have another example, or another side of research we do, is the population, touching the population larger scale, diabetes again and obesity. Mm-hmm. As I mentioned earlier, 1 out of 4 is actually diabetic today. Mm-hmm. And now we try to understand why. Why 2 people, one is diabetic, one is not, when sometimes they live in the same house, brother and sister. So we now, for answering these questions, depend on studying thousands of samples, which we have actually achieved recently. And we are now in the process of trying to understand. But we are happy to say, in fact, we are already seeing some special changes that not reported before that are responsible for what we see in diabetes. Mm-hmm. And diabetes is not like the first kind of the disease, because this is, we call it polygenic, meaning you need more than one gene set to come together to show the disease. Mm-hmm. And this we have started, as I said, but now we are in the process of analyzing the data. We have some early signs of important genetic markers that separate someone from being diabetic, someone not. And that's really important because when we look at population of Kuwait, we really, deal with a very mixed kind of, population from, as you know, people settled, from every region when they settle in the country, then they bring their genetics with them.
Yeah.
And they took from their parents and then they give it to their children again. So these changes are important. Sometimes just to tell somebody, I belong to this family or that family, but we use it to say if someone have the disease or not. This is really our main concern, and that's how we use it. And when we compare ourselves to another population like Icelandic population, which is today, I think, about a third size of Kuwaiti population. And that is such a homogeneous population, meaning, they don't have many grandfathers. Basically, it's like a small village that grew. And there wasn't much of mixing, people, marriages, etc. And those people, they also provide a different model for understanding diseases. And today they actually being so much under focus from so many genetic investigators to understand disease and health, because that way there is uniformity. You don't have many changes. But here we deal with like a pool of genetic changes. And then how you now make logic, and sense from this difference, whether it's simply just a difference between somebody from this family or this family versus no, this has to do as a signal of developing disease at one point. So our job is more complex in a way. Yeah. We are actually having more difficult job. And we have looked at already our Kuwaiti population, and we can see they in fact are clustering together. We can see people actually similar. When they're similar, we can see them as a group, and we can see more than one group. And that means this information is very useful grounds now to connect it to the health and disease. And before we did not have this knowledge, but now we do. And of course, this knowledge remains, in the center, and it only talks about health and disease and doesn't discuss who is the family, who is not, because we don't see it that way. We just use it as a research to understand the disease. Then we come back with solutions. And that's what we try to do.
That's really amazing, given the fact that you have mentioned Kuwait is a pool of genes.
Yes.
Yeah, and you mentioned that the diabetes that you have found during your research here is a polygenic. And how does that affect the treatment?
Now, I cannot speak as a clinician because I'm a researcher and I'm not very familiar with the treatment drugs for diabetes. We know the famous one, metformin and so on, for example. But again, when we look at these diseases altogether, the genes for diabetes, we look at where these genes are functioning. Sometimes you have a set of 20 genes, but they are basically come down to 2 or 3 pathways. That means, a subset of these genes work together in a chain reaction, A, B, C, D. And that helps us to understand what is actually happening, because of these changes in these genes to lead to diabetes. So when we understand the pathway, as we call it in biological terms, then we understand how the sugar imbalance is taking place. Then that can offer, solutions, to interfere with this by using the right drugs. And of course, to go to that level, it's not really a click. We know before you put a drug in the market, that can be 10 to 15 years of research. Yeah. But if we don't do the first step, that means we are a year or 5 years late in starting the process. So the sooner we have this new knowledge, the sooner we can look for new solutions that are, cannot be, one treatment fits all. That is not existing in reality. Yeah. So hopefully we can provide some new solutions. But we do the really baby steps now, but they are important steps. And we took those important steps to understand in this number of genes, which most important here, and try next thing to link to our biology of our sugar homeostasis, how they control sugar, how they control insulin secretion and action, and how that also connect to the other beast we deal with, which is obesity, which is really an equal challenge to the society here. And
is it genetic, obesity?
Absolutely genetic, but there is also environmental factor with it. So what happens is when you put environmental and genetics together, then you're really putting gas on fire. So this is how we look at it.
So now obese people can say that we are genetically inherited the disease.
I don't know, you're talking about healthy obese, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, this term is used lately, and yes, there are two obese people, one is healthy, one is not. And that again has to do with details, some people may be obese, but they really move a lot. And that means they also try maybe doing something, by eating right, by exercising, even as a small walk, as opposed to someone who's sedentary, lay back, not moving much. So you can compare the two. So it's not all or nothing, it's really gradient.
Yeah.
And it's a mix of all of these.
We'll take a short break, then we will be back with you, dear viewers, to discuss more about genetic diseases and the impact in Kuwaiti population. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We continue our discussion with Dr. Osama Alsmadi, head of Dasman Genome Center, in our discussion of understanding genetic diseases here in Kuwait especially. So Dr. Osama, can we know what is the common genetic diseases here in Kuwait?
I can give some examples. However, if interested to look at more precise statistics and number, best source for that is the Kuwait Medical Genetics Center. And they have the numbers, the cases annually, and they keep track. But what I believe from our, again, modest observation, really eye diseases, and we have also hearing loss is standing, and sickle cell is again leading one of these common diseases in Kuwait. That's again just some examples. But again, the more common ones are the society diseases, which, as we mentioned earlier, is the diabetes and obesity. But for family diseases, which are the rare diseases, as we call it, is again happening due to only one gene change, as we call it monogenic. And there is some also existing database in the Emirates, I think, in Arab Emirates. And they have archived nearly 1,000 plus important single gene diseases in the region. But altogether, if we look at these diseases globally, we have close to 6,000 or so of diseases. How many of these we see here? We have at least 1,000 of them, a little bit more even. And of course, these are again reported clinically. And that means from doctors' experience who meet the family and their affected children, mostly, such disease, because as we know, they really start from birth, because someone is born with such disease, because they took it from their parents and they live with it. And some of these diseases are also including some dysmorphic features, meaning they really suffer from anatomical changes in their face, their lip, sometimes their shape of ears, these are driven by genetic changes. And we see some of these. But again, to have more precise statistics, I recommend to refer to the Kuwait Medical Genetics Center, where they have more of good numbers, which they keep track. Because all in all, they are part of Ministry of Health. And when a doctor in practice comes across a case of what seems as a heritable disease, they usually refer to that center and they take the first look. And as I mentioned, we started to collaborate with them, looking at some of these families, and some we already resolved and some is now under investigation. And we think this is an important, again, early step to build on and scale it up, hopefully, as we go forward. Yeah.
That's really good. Always collaborations are and the positive side of patient care. And we hope that the collaboration with the Ministry of Health will gain its fruit, and people will be gaining better understanding of such genetic diseases. I have a question. Do you think that environmental factors here in Kuwait, either a pre-Iraqi occupation or post-Iraqi occupation, or even the factories here in Kuwait, has affected genetic changes or mutations in Kuwait population?
This is a very interesting question, and definitely comes to the mind of the society and sometimes policymakers and individuals. And I think, yes, there is a role for environment on genetic diseases. Sometimes it's not really affecting directly. There is a term, again, referred to the epigenetics, meaning there is a pressure from the environment that not necessarily change the gene itself, but it can change the environment surrounding the gene. Some changes in the sometimes high, that happens at the protein level, which affects the protein function and from being expressed or not. So to answer this in a fair way, you really need a lot of research, and that means you have to look at multiple generations, from father to child to grandchild, and sometimes 3 generations or more are needed to really see the effect. And then you look at the genetics of these 3 generations side by side. And that means that such studies require time. So you're talking on average generation size is nearly 20 years. So you really have to wait a little while before you can answer these good questions. But do environment play an effect, pollution and smoke and radiation? Yes, no question about it. But we require a continuous research, and I have to say there is existing efforts, in fact, to address this. But I do not think they are ready to make statements that can really answer such good questions. But it's definitely exists, but requires some more time and more research. But I'm aware, at least one example, collaboration between actually Harvard Medical College and Dasman Diabetes Insitute. There is good collaboration in this domain. But I think in the right time, we'll hear their report. But there are efforts today exist to address this, in a mothers and their children, and by taking biological samples from all of those people now, in a way you bank it, so until you have the right number, the right combinations, then you look at genetics, and also sometimes non-genetic elements, just like pollutants, from hair cells, from skin swab and things like that. You can start, answering some of these. And I believe not long time from now, we can hear some at least early preliminary reports on such topics, hopefully not long time from now.
Okay, you have mentioned earlier, sorry to go a little back, you have mentioned earlier that you have generated 8 genome maps, genetic maps in Kuwait from the population here in Kuwait.
Yes.
Are you generating those maps for a healthy young individual, or you are getting even old, elderly, to compare the changes across the years?
When it comes to a whole genome, in a database, you can have a non-disease database, you can have a disease database. In those 8 people, some of them are healthy, non-obese, non-diabetic, and some have. But of course, to make a solid statement, you need hundreds, if not thousands, to put together. Why I mention this is to us because this is a new thing, and we have, I think, put the first step on the ladder. And now the matter is to scale it up. And we here where we again stress on collaboration, as you mentioned, where Diabetes, Dasman Diabetes Insitute and the Genome Center, part of it, cannot do the effort alone. This is where you really need the backing of the country behind you, and primarily Ministry of Health and policymakers and financing. And as you know, what the research we do is, I cannot say it's really inexpensive. It really costs a lot of, capital to invest in it. But it's worth it, because the future of the country, the generations, and there's no shortcut. If you don't do this, then you can't, use somebody else's knowledge, because it will not be useful or fit here. So we started the road, and I think we really need more collaboration. And we have really generous support from Kuwait Foundation or Advancement of Science, the KFAS. And they're really behind us financially and scientifically, and they encourage us, and they're really working with us. And we really appreciate the support they give us. And we think with them, with Ministry of Health, Kuwait University, this what we call consortium work. And it's not myself alone, but we need all of those who really share the interest to come together. And then if we start, and I hope not long from today, to get on that road, we'll be also ready to collaborate with neighboring countries, the region. Then we go globally to the other continents in Asia and Europe and North America, etc. So it becomes like, again, a chain reaction.
Yeah.
But when we start this process, we'll be in better position to be partners in science and research and health. And we are, I think, have already taken these steps, but we need more.
Yeah. And usually how long it takes to get one individual complete genome map?
Very good question again. And basically, when we do genome, mistakes are not allowed. Because I can give a false result, then you think you're going to get this disease when you don't. So what we do is we look at what we call is coverage in our technology terms. Meaning, when I look at your genome or mine, to be sure, I want to see the same position of the genome at least 40 times, if not more. Then I see it 40 times, then I believe this is correct. So if it's a change, that means I have to see the change 40 times. And of course, it's the same change, but we see it over and over because the technology, again, allows you to walk through it and then look and report what you see in this location.
So it's a manual work?
Well, it's manual will be impossible, but we have, again, computer tools. But these are very, actually, powerful computer tools, not the laptop I use and you use. This is more of high-end computer capacities, which we also brought in the Dasman Genome Center informatics collaboration in the support of the information technology department. We put all this together because one genome, in fact, in technical terms, we can finish in about 20 days.
Each map?
Or in 20 days, we can produce approximately 4 people at that coverage. So that means that every month we can, on average, do 5 genomes at that level. If you want lower coverage, you can do maybe 20. But if you want good information, results, it has to be at higher coverage, as we call, and this is what we do.
And is it open for public? Somebody can come to your center and say, I want genetic map of myself?
It's usually a procedure, where when we do research, we have to follow very high levels of ethical guidelines, international and local. We put all this together because that means confidentiality is there. I cannot discuss your genome with someone else. And this is even a contract between us. So this remains confidential information. And then the system allows someone to walk in and volunteer. But usually, what we do is we do this exercise now as, again, a seed exercise. We are not at the level where say we're going to now sequence Kuwait and build the genome project of Kuwait. Because that's, again, when we need the backing of the country and all of the policymakers, decision makers to come together, and Ministry of Health, and the financing also component, and KFAS and all of that to come together to enable such a huge very daring and very ambitious project. But it really started in the, again, region, and why not in Kuwait? So I think we are really ready for it, but it will require, again, some investment, because now if you look at the hundreds of thousands, that means one center alone cannot do it, one machine alone cannot do it, and you're going to require more manpower, more funding, and of course, then more volunteers. And that's where I want to send a message to this community, in fact, not to be scared by research. Research is really useful, and it's kept confidential, but we depend on the community to come to us, participate in our projects, so we can generate useful knowledge that come back to the same individuals, and in a useful way, while their identity is kept confidential, but we bring back the information that concerns the country and not just an individual. And we think this is kind of doing good to your community in a way.
That's really good. We'll have a shorter break now, then we will be back with Dr. Osama to discuss more about genetics and genetic diseases in Kuwait. Stay tuned.
causing such devastation? The answer lies in truly understanding how the whole body is affected by diabetes. The heart, blood vessels, the brain, kidneys, liver, eyes, and nervous system. And that is why I'm here. The hormone insulin plays an important role in controlling blood glucose. Insulin allows sugar, glucose, to enter cells of the body from the bloodstream where it is used as energy, such as in muscle or brain cells, or stored, such as in liver or fat cells. Type 2 diabetes occurs when insufficient insulin is released or the body is unable to use insulin properly. This can lead to an insulin secretion deficiency or insulin resistance, which plays a key role in developing hypoglycemia or elevated blood glucose, and eventually type 2 diabetes. As a result of hypoglycemia, glucose accumulates in the bloodstream, causing acute diabetic symptoms such as tiredness, blurred vision, thirst, and frequent urination. But diabetes is also a chronic lifelong condition and thus requires careful control. Without proper management, damage may occur to widespread bodily functions. These are termed microvascular complications, which can affect the eyes, feet, and kidneys, or macrovascular complications, which could affect the brain or the heart. Microvascular complications of diabetes can impair eyesight or cause vision loss. Excess blood sugar can cause nerve damage. Over time, high blood glucose levels damage the kidney filtering systems, allowing protein into the urine, a condition called microalbuminuria. Longer-term excess glucose consumption progresses to a condition known as diabetic nephropathy. As a result of diabetes complications, in severe cases, patients can experience kidney failure requiring dialysis or transplantation. So, now that we've looked at the microvascular complications that can arise from diabetes, we'll turn our attention to the macrovascular complications. For example, atherosclerosis, which is a hardening and narrowing of the arteries caused by increased sugar in the bloodstream. When this happens in arteries supplying the heart, it can cause coronary heart disease, leading to heart attacks and angina. People with diabetes are 2 to 4 times more likely to have a heart attack than someone without the disease. In fact, adults being treated for diabetes are just as likely to have a heart attack or stroke or die from cardiovascular causes as people who have had a prior heart attack. Second, high levels of fats, such as cholesterol, in the bloodstream of diabetics further increase the risk of heart disease. In the brain, atherosclerosis can cause diabetes patients to suffer a stroke. The risk of stroke among people with type 2 diabetes is already high at the onset of the disease. In fact, it's more than double that of the general population. So you see, type 2 diabetes can affect our bodies dramatically. Every 10 seconds, 2 people develop diabetes and 1 person dies from diabetes-related causes around the world. Innovative therapeutic options for type 2 diabetes are critical to help prevent these serious long-term
We continue our discussion with Dr. Osama, head of Dasman Center of Genome Studies. Dr. Osama, we were discussing the genome mapping and such. There was such companies online where you just put your name, pay a fee of around 100 KD. They will send you a swab to take from your mouth, then send them again. They will give you the report where you are high risk at developing diabetes, you are low risk of developing heart disease. What do you think of such services?
Here's my opinion on genome scale screenings. Compared to a single mutation, the example that we mentioned earlier is sickle cell. Mm-hmm. When you tell me I have the mutation, then I get the disease, that's when I believe it. Mm-hmm. But if you tell me based on one or two markers of type 2 diabetes, which we know is polygenic, and today altogether we think we have about 400 genes that play in different levels and impact on the disease. I cannot use that information to say I'll be diabetic or not when you give me that many genes, or cancer or obesity. So this knowledge, when it comes to polygenic diseases, cancer included, for example, cardiovascular diseases included, it's not today is still, I think, is a mature field. Mm-hmm. This is again a young field where it requires guidelines, requires a consortium scale. When you have consensus by all of the groups who come together to set guidelines, how you use this high volume of information, of genetic information, to tell someone if they're going to develop cancer or not. Again, because it requires many genes to come together. And yes, if it's a single gene disease, I can use the information. If it comes at a complex diseases, mm-hmm. like diabetes and cancer and obesity examples, then that becomes a very gray area. And because those, when they give you a report back, they will not guarantee someone will or will not. They can simply scare you and put stress and emotional stress on someone. So we have to deal with that with caution, And again, I'm not dismissing the field, but I think again that is where you need guidance. And there is example when somebody were overselling this, like an example of company was 23andMe. You may heard of it, and it was in the market where you send your buccal swab from inside the mouth cells, put in a small tube and send by mail to this company to bring back a report to tell you, yes, they can tell you belong to this heritage, you belong to this ethnic background, but then when they start talking about you're going to develop cancer or not, that's when I caution. Mm-hmm. And by the way, this company ended up going out of business because they were actually violating, these kind of rules where people cannot, sell this information with confidence to tell someone will or will not have the disease. So again, this requires, I think, more efforts, but the field exists, and there is serious now reports, that come in literature. They talk about this genomics medicine, as they call it. And this actually exists, but again, we are not at the level where we have now the guidelines, how much you can use it to report it back to an individual with confidence they are going to come down with the disease or not. But the principle is there, and that's again a little bit of future look. However, doesn't mean it's not possible. It is possible, but it's not possible now because this is just a growing, emerging field. Yes.
Yeah. Before ending the interview today, what do you think that Dasman Center potential and what in the future hides for Dasman Genome Center?
Well, I'm very optimistic, to really see more and more research projects, taking place in Dasman Diabetes Insitute, including genomic research and other also research disciplines. And we also depend on community engagement. Research cannot be done on a one or two or 10 people. You need community, and this is something we see in the other societies in the West. By a TV ad, you get hundreds next day.
Yeah.
And I like to see this culture here developing by people coming forward to participate when they know their identity is kept confidential, their health information, is kept confidential, and with discussion with them, we can, when we have also some information that we see when we study their genetic material they share with us, we can bring this back to that same person, rather than the society altogether.
Yeah.
So I think the potential is high. We need community engaged with us, and we also depend on the support of Ministry of Health, engagement with Kuwait University, more support also from KFAS in Kuwait, and all together we can do it. And I think the future is really promising for research here, but we need to come together as a community and researchers and clinicians and people, which need to come together.
Yeah. Dr. Osama Alsmadi, scientist and head of Dasman Genome Center, we would like really thank you for joining us today and spotting the light on a very new and emerging field of medicine and personalization of the diagnosis and treatment for individual. Thank you very much, Dr. Osama.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and appreciate the time you have given me to share our interest and looks.
Sure. Dear viewer, we thank you for watching us. This is the last episode before Ramadan. We hope that you have a very festive month and Eid, Ramadan Mubarak, and enjoy. Have a good night. Thank you.